The cramped walls of the escape pod pressed against his scaled body, each shallow breath a growing struggle. Red warning lights blinked. Relentlessly on the console, a silent confirmation of what he already knew. He was dying. 3 days ago, he had stood tall on the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, watching his crew prepare for battle. The Core Empire's fleet had arrived without warning, their sleek black ships cutting through the void like predators. The ensuing battle had been swift and brutal. The Core's superior weapons and unyielding tactics had left no room for mercy. One by one, the Confederation vessels erupted into fiery debris. Zexy's ship was no exception, he vividly remembered. The moment the hull gave way, a deafening crack as it split apart. The emergency alarms blared, atmosphere venting into the vacuum. His crew had scrambled for the escape pods, their actions honed through endless drills. Zexy was the last to leave, ensuring every soul had a chance to survive, because that's what commanders did, even at their own expense. Now he was alone. The other pods had fallen silent hours ago, their signals extinguished, their power supplies might have failed, or the life support systems had simply given out. Perhaps those inside had chosen to surrender to the inevitable. Zexy couldn't fault them. The Valeri were warriors, but even the bravest knew when the battle was lost. His own pod fared no better. The life support system sputtered, straining. To function, the oxygen levels dwindled 12% and falling. The cold seeped into his bones as the heating system faltered, and his stomach cramped from lack of nourishment. Damaged rations offered no relief. Everything tasted of metal and despair. Silence was the worst. Space had always been quiet, but on a ship, there were constant sounds, engines humming, computers chirping, the chatter and laughter of his crew. Now there was only his labored breathing and the faint, erratic clicks of failing machinery. For 3 days, he had broadcast distress signals. The emergency beacon blinked, a futile plea for help in an empty sector. No colonies, no patrols, no trade routes. This void was devoid of life. The nearest Confederation base was light years away. Consumed with greater battles against the Core, Zexy glanced at the star charts on the flickering console, their faint glow illuminating his weary face. This was a graveyard, a drifting sea, of shattered ships and frozen corpses. Even if someone tried to find him, this place was nameless, forgotten, worthless. His thoughts turned to his family on Prime. Sierra, his mate, would be waiting for news. His children would ask why he wasn't coming home. The Confederation would tell them he died with honor, fighting for their survival. They'd hand Sierra a medal, a pension, and perhaps name a street in his memory. It was a hollow consolation. The pod shuddered as another system failed, and yet another warning light flared to life. The navigation system sputtered, leaving him directionless. He was a starship commander who had charted countless worlds, yet now he couldn't even discern which way was up. A bitter laugh escaped him, thin and ragged. Zexy closed his eyes, seeking solace in distant memories, the academy, where he had honed his skills. His first command aboard a modest patrol ship that had once seemed like the pinnacle of achievement. The day he met Sierra came to him now, her smile lighting up when he spoke of the stars. He thought of his children, their trusting eyes filled with the belief that he could shield them from anything. Perhaps he had, in some way. The Stellar Dawn had perished. But not without cost to the Core. Each enemy ship they destroyed was one less threat to the worlds they had sworn to protect. His crew had fought valiantly, and their sacrifice held meaning. It wasn't victory, but it was honor. The oxygen alarm interrupted his thoughts. Beeping more urgently now, 9% remaining. Perhaps 2 hours if he were fortunate. Zexy scaled. Hand trembled as he activated the communications panel, his voice thin but resolute. "This is Commander Zexy of the Confederation Navy. If anyone finds this recording, know that we fought with everything we had. The crew of the Stellar Dawn gave their lives as warriors, defending our people from the Core invasion. Tell our families we faced the void without fear, and that our spirits will forever watch from the eternal stars." He hesitated, searching for words that might endure beyond him, something a commander should leave behind. But his mind was clouded, his breath shallow. In the end, he simply spoke the truth. "I wish I could have seen home one last time." He ended the recording and sank back into his seat. The pod seemed to press closer around him, a metal coffin sealing his fate. There was nothing left to do but wait, and to face the end with the dignity of a warrior. Then, the proximity sensor emitted a sharp, rhythmic beep. Zexy barely registered it at first, assuming another failure in the pod's failing systems. But the signal was clear, insistent. He glanced at the sensor display, where an impossible sight appeared to ship fast and deliberate, weaving through the debris field. It wasn't a core vessel or a Confederation rescue craft. The computer couldn't identify it. Zexy stared, disbelief warring with the faintest flicker of hope. After 3 days of silence and death, someone was approaching. He had no idea what it was, or if it would help him, but for the first time since the battle, despair loosened its grip. He dared to hope. Jake Morrison sipped lukewarm coffee as he skimmed salvage reports. The hum of the Lucky Strike, a constant companion. The bridge was a patchwork of salvaged components, the air thick with the scent of recycled systems. It wasn't luxurious, but Jake liked it that way. Big ships meant big crews, and big crews meant politics, something he had no interest in. "Captain, I've got strange readings from Sector 7, called Sam Torres from the navigation station." Young, sharp-eyed, and quick-fingered, she scanned her controls with practiced ease. "Looks like a battle zone fresh wreckage. Lots of it, still radiating heat." Jake set his mug down and leaned over her display. The screen showed a chaotic field of twisted debris stretched across kilometer ship fragments, broken weapons, and the shattered remains of at least 6 vessels. A scavenger's bounty lay before them, a treasure trove that could pay for months of fuel and supplies. "Any idea who fought here?" Jake asked, his brow furrowed. "Negative," Sam replied. "The ship designs aren't in our database, but I'm picking up energy readings, escape pods. Some still have life signs." Jake stroked his stubbled jaw. Most species had strict rescue protocols, and survivors wouldn't be left floating in the void unless something had gone terribly wrong. Either help was too far away, or no one cared enough to come. Both possibilities left a sour taste in his mouth. "How long since the fight?" Sam analyzed the data. "Judging by debris dispersion and heat decayed 3 days. Give or take. Whatever happened, it wasn't pretty." From the engineering station, Lisa Hayes glanced up, her jumpsuit streaked with oil, experienced and methodical. She had been working on the salvage arm motors. "Looks like we're about to get our hands full," she remarked dryly, her tone betraying a grim understanding of what awaited them in the wreckage. Morning had come, and Lisa's hands were blackened with grease. "If there are survivors, they don't have long," she said grimly. 3 days in an escape pod means their life support's nearly out. We need to act fast if we're going to help them." Bobby Clark glanced up from the medical station, his calm demeanor belying the urgency of the moment. A wiry man with steady hands and kind eyes, Bobby had performed miracles in the tiny med bay that barely had space for one patient. "I can handle most humanoid species with what we've got," he said, his voice measured. "But if it's something exotic, I might have to improvise." "What are we dealing with?" Jake asked. Sam shook her head, her expression tense. "No idea. These pod designs aren't in any database. Could be anyone." Jake studied the screen. The Lucky Strike was a salvage ship, not a rescue vessel. Their supplies, space, and time were all limited. Taking in survivors would strain them further, risking their own survival. It wasn't practical, and it certainly wasn't good business. But Jake had been in dire straits before. He remembered the despair of waiting for help that never came. His crew, all misfits and outcasts, understood that feeling too. He made his decision. Sam set course for the nearest pod. Lisa, get the salvage bay ready for survivors. Bobby, prep the med bay for unknown species. Jake sank back into his chair as Sam began plotting. "We're doing the decent thing." "Aye, Captain," Sam replied, her hands already moving over the controls. The Lucky Strike turned toward the debris field, its engines humming softly. 20 minutes later, they reached the first pod. It was unlike anything they'd seen, angular, scarred, and coated in what looked like metallic scales. Inside, through a scorched viewport, Jake, could make out a figure. Life signs are weak but holding, Bobby said after a quick scan. Looks like a reptilian species. Big guy, probably 7 feet tall. Can we dock? Jake asked. Lisa inspected the pod through her scanner. Docking collar's non-standard, but I can make it work. Give me 10 minutes. As Lisa worked, Jake examined the alien through the viewport. It wore a military uniform, a dark blue suit with silver insignias. Despite being unconscious, it had an air of resolve, like a soldier who had endured too much but refused to break. Docking collars attached and sealed, Lisa reported. Atmosphere's compatible enough, mostly nitrogen and oxygen. We can bring him aboard. Jake and Bobby donned emergency suits and entered the pod. Acrid smoke filled the cramped. Space warning lights flashed ominously, and the life support system wheezed its last. The alien was unconscious, its scaled skin shifting from green to brown under the flickering lights. A pronounced ridge ran down its skull. Though its broad shoulders suggested strength, it looked fragile, stretched thin by its ordeal. Help me lift him, Bobby said, running a scanner over the alien's limp form. Vitals are a mess, but he's alive. Carefully, they carried the alien aboard and laid him in the medical bay. Bobby worked swiftly, attaching monitors and setting up an IV. Will he make it? Jake asked. He's dehydrated and oxygen-starved, but he should pull through, Bobby said. The bigger question is what happens when he wakes up. We don't know if his people are friends or foes. Jake watched the alien's chest rise and fall under the sterile light. The uniform hinted at military origins, which might spell trouble. Yet being abandoned in a pod by his own side suggested the alien could be an alier, at least grateful for rescue. We'll treat him as a guest unless he gives us a reason not to, Jake decided. Sam, how many other pods are out there? For more with life signs, Captain, Sam replied over the intercom. But they're scattered, and some are barely functional. Jake nodded. Then we'd better get moving. Bobby, keep our guest stable. Lisa, get the cargo bay ready. Stam, plot a course for the next pod. As the Lucky Strike navigated the field of wreckage, Jake mulled over what they were getting into. Rescuing unknown aliens from a mysterious battle wasn't standard procedure, but the soldiers' quiet dignity convinced him they were doing the right thing. Everyone deserved a chance to go home. Zexy woke to unfamiliar voices speaking a language he didn't understand. His head throbbed and his mouth was dry, but he was breathing clean air for the first time in days. Beneath him, the surface felt. Smooth and solid alien, but comforting, was coming for you. And leaving someone to die out there isn't how we do things. Zexy blinked, momentarily stunned by the simplicity of Jake's answer.
Out!
In his years of service, he had encountered countless species, each governed by intricate politics and self-interest. Altruism, especially in wartime, was a rare commodity. Your actions are ... unexpected, Zexy said carefully, his voice still hoarse. Jake chuckled, sipping from his steaming mug. We get that a lot, but let's keep things simple, Commander. You're alive, and we'll make sure you stay that way. Before Zexy could probe further, a chime sounded over the ship's intercom, and Sam's voice came through. Captain, we've reached the second pod. Life signs are weak but present. Jake set his mug down on a nearby counter and straightened. Looks like we've got more work to do. Bobby, keep an eye on our guest here. Commander, get some rest, you've earned it. Zexy watched as Jake left the room, his demeanor calm yet purposeful. The contrast between the human captain's easy confidence and the harsh military rigidity Zexy was accustomed to was striking. Don't mind him, Bobby said, adjusting one of the monitors beside Zexy's bed. Jake's a good guy, even. If he's not the most traditional captain you've probably dealt with. Zexy let his head rest against the pillow, the unfamiliar hum of the Lucky Strike systems filling the silence. He had so many questions, yet his body screamed for rest. As his eyes began to close, he whispered, why would anyone risk so much for strangers? Bobby paused, his hands steady as he adjusted an IV. Because it's the right thing to do, he said softly. You know, sometimes that's all the reason you need. As the Lucky Strike moved through the wreckage toward the second escape pod, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision. Salvaging debris was risky enough without. complicating matters by taking on unknown survivors. Yet the thought of leaving those pods behind sat heavy on his conscience, closing in on the second pod. Sam announced from the navigation station, "This one's in worse shape. Hull integrity looks compromised, and I'm reading multiple fractures in the life support system." Lisa, Jake called. "We're going to need another miracle." "On it," Lisa replied. "It's already heading toward the salvage bay with her toolkit." The crew worked in practiced silence as the Lucky Strike approached the damaged pod. This one was smaller, its surface scorched and warped. Inside, Jake could barely make out the faint glow of an emergency beacon and the curled form of another survivor. "Life signs are faint," Bobby reported over the comm. "If we don't get them out now, they're not going to make it." "Sam, keep us steady," Jake ordered. "Lisa, let me know when you've got the docking collars secure." Minutes passed like hours as Lisa worked to attach the Lucky Strike's makeshift connection to the failing pod. Finally, her voice crackled over the intercom. "We're good to go, Captain, but the seal's not going to hold for long." Jake and Bobby suited up once more and entered the second pod. The interior was worse than the first. Smoke and sparks filled the air. The walls were covered in frost from failing temperature controls. The occupant was smaller than Zexai, their features obscured by a cracked helmet. "Breathing, but barely," Bobby confirmed, his scanner working overtime. "Species unknown. Let's move fast." Together, they lifted the figure from the pod and carried them back to the Lucky Strike. The ship's med bay was now stretched to its limits. With Bobby juggling monitors and treatments for two patients of entirely different species, Jake stood back, watching Bobby work and wondering just how many more pods they could manage before their resources ran dry. Yet when he glanced at Zexai, now resting more peacefully, and the second survivor beginning to stabilize, he knew he couldn't stop. "Their commanders believe you are laying a trap, while others think you are merely desperate. They cannot agree on how to proceed." Jake grinned, despite the chaos. "Good. Let's keep them guessing. Sam, keep us in the densest part of the debris." "Field, Lisa, any chance you can rig a few more surprises?" "Working on it." Lisa's voice crackled over the comm. "But I'm running low on usable charges. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here." Jake turned to the tactical display, watching the core fleet hesitate, their previously tight formation loosening as commanders argued. The Corps, it seemed, were not accustomed to unpredictability. Captain Zexai said, his voice steadier, "Now, your actions have disrupted their chain of command. This is ... remarkable. The Corps' military doctrine is rigid, inflexible. They rely on overwhelming strength and precision. Your unorthodox approach has made them doubt." Jake's smile widened. "Well, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's improvising. Let's give them more to doubt." He keyed the "Come again, Sam. Bring us around the largest debris cluster. I want the wreckage between us and their heaviest ships, Lisa. I need one last big explosion, something that'll look like we've got more firepower than we actually do." "On it," Captain Lisa replied, her voice strained but resolute. The Lucky Strike weaved through the wreckage like a predator stalking prey, using the debris as both cover and weapon. Each explosion Lisa set off was carefully timed, creating the illusion of a larger, more coordinated force. The core fleet's hesitation grew, their confusion evident as their ships faltered and repositioned. Captain Zexai said again, his tone almost reverent, "You're forcing them to retreat. They fear you." Jake's brow furrowed. "Not fear, Commander, confusion. That's our weapon right now. But they'll adapt if we give them time." A sharp alarm blared across the bridge. "Shields at 30%, Lisa reported. Another direct hit, and we're toast." Jake's jaw tightened. They had bought time, but not much. He turned to the comms. "Zexai, your people, the Valeri Confederation can. They send reinforcements. There." Was a pause before Zexai replied. "It would take hours, maybe longer. By then, the Corps will have destroyed us." Jake sighed. He had been hoping for a miracle, but it seemed they would have to rely on their own ingenuity. Captain Sam called out, her voice tense but excited. I'm picking up a large energy signature in the debris field. It's VALARI tech, and it's powering up. Zex's voice came through, sharp with realization. That must be the Vindicator. It was our fleet's flagship. Its systems are still functional. It could give us the edge we need. Jake leaned forward in his chair. What kind of edge? It's equipped with a prototype energy weapon, Zexai explained, capable of disabling ships within a wide radius. But it requires manual activation. Jake didn't hesitate. Sam, get us to the Vindicator. Zexai, can you operate this weapon? I can try, Zexai said, determination in his voice. But someone will need to get me aboard. Jake glanced at the tactical display. The core fleet was regrouping, their hesitation fading as they adjusted to the Lucky Strike's tactics. Time was running out. Lisa, prep the shuttle, Jake ordered. Zexai, suit up. We're going to give those core bastards something to really worry about. The shuttle launch was tense, the Lucky Strike taking heavy fire to cover their escape. Jake piloted the small craft himself, weaving through the debris toward the Vindicator. The Valeri flagship loomed ahead, battered but imposing, its sleek lines marred by the scars of battle as they docked. Zexai moved with newfound strength, his military training kicking in. This way, he said, leading Jake through the damaged corridors toward the weapons control room. Can you get it working? Jake asked as they arrived. Chamber dominated by a console glowing faintly with residual power. Zex's fingers flew over the controls. The system is intact, but the power levels are unstable. I can fire once, maybe twice, before it overloads. Once will have to do, Jake said, his eyes on the viewport as the core ships closed in. The weapon charged, a low hum building into a deafening roar. Zexai gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his scaled brow. Targeting the core fleet now, firing. Blinding pulse of energy erupted from the Vindicator, sweeping through the debris field and enveloping the core ships. One by one, their systems flickered and failed, leaving them adrift. On the come, Sam's voice was jubilant. It worked. The core ships are dead in the water. Jake grinned, clapping Zexai on the shoulder. Nice work, Commander. Let's get back to the Lucky Strike before they figure out how to recover. As they returned to the salvage ship, Zexai looked at Jake with newfound respect. You saved my life and the lives of my crew, at great risk to yourself. I will not forget. This, Captain Morrison, as the Lucky Strike docked at the designated asteroid, the tension aboard the ship was palpable. The crew had gathered in the small hangar bay to see Captain Jake Morrison off, their faces a mixture of worry and admiration. Jake stood at the center, strapping on his gear. Sidearm hung at his hip, and he carried a compact shield generator. On his wrist equipment cobbled together from salvage. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. You don't have to do this, Captain, Sam said, her voice trembling. We could find another way. Jake smiled at her, the kind of smile that carried both reassurance and finality. There's always another way, Sam, but sometimes the simplest path is the right one. Zexai stepped forward, his tall Valeri frame towering over the humans. Captain Morrison, he began, his voice firm, I wish to fight in your place. The Corps will respect me as a Valeri warrior, and I am better suited for combat. Jake shook his head. Zexai, I appreciate it, but this isn't just about strength. It is about showing the Corps something they've never seen. Humanity doesn't abandon its own or its friends. The words struck Zexai deeply, leaving him silent as Jake turned and boarded the shuttle that would take him to the asteroid. The surface of the asteroid was harsh and barren, its jagged terrain illuminated by the distant glow of a nearby star. Jake stepped out of the shuttle and approached the designated combat arena, circular platform carved into the rock, surrounded by faintly glowing markers. Opposite him stood war leader Thakmore. The Corps champion was an imposing figure over 7 feet tall, clad in intricate battle armor that gleamed in the dim light, carried a massive energy blade that hummed menacingly, its edges crackling with power. Jake, by contrast, looked almost laughable. His patched-up suit and sidearm seemed insignificant next to Thakmore's imposing presence. But his expression was calm, resolute. The Corps gathered at the edges of the platform, their black ships hovering overhead. The lucky strike. Crew watched from their own vessel's viewports, holding their breath. Thakmor stepped forward, his voice a deep growl. Human, you are brave, but bravery will not save you. Do you wish to forfeit before this battle begins? Jake shook his head. Not a chance. Let's get this over with. Thakmor raised his blade in salute, and Jake drew his sidearm. Combat began. Thakmor charged, his blade swinging in a deadly arc. Jake dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. He fired his sidearm, the energy bolts pinging harmlessly off the core champion's armor. You fight like a scavenger, Thakmor sneered, advancing relentlessly. Jake grinned. That's because I am one. He led Thakmor on a chase across the platform, using the uneven terrain to his advantage. Every step was calculated, every movement designed to frustrate and exhaust his opponent. Thakmor's strikes grew more aggressive, his movements less precise. Jake waited for his moment, then activated his shield generator just as the energy blade came down. The shield absorbed the impact with a brilliant flash, and Jake rolled away, firing a concentrated blast at Thakmor's exposed flank. The shot connected, causing the core champion to stumble. Jake pressed the advantage, aiming for the joints. In Thakmor's armor, each strike was met with resistance, but the tide began to turn on the lucky strike. The crew watched in stunned silence. He's doing it, Sam whispered. He's actually doing it. Zex's claws flexed nervously. He's not fighting to win. He's fighting to endure. That is, ... unprecedented. Double quotes back on the asteroid. Thakmor roared in frustration. You fight like a pest, human. Stand and face me. Shh. Jake smirked, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. You're just mad because a pest is making you look bad. With a roar, Thakmor charged again, but this time, Jake was ready. He lured the core champion toward a precarious edge of the platform, then triggered a small explosive he had planted earlier. The blast threw Thakmor off balance, and he fell to one knee. Jake aimed his sidearm at the core leader's helmet. Yield, he said firmly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Thakmor dropped his blade and raised his hands. I yield, he growled. The core fleet withdrew, honoring the ancient tradition. On board the Lucky Strike, cheers erupted as Jake returned, battered but alive. As Zexai watched Jake reunite with his crew, he felt a deep sense of awe. Humanity had proven itself not through strength, but through courage, ingenuity, and an unwavering sense of honor. He turned to Jake, his voice filled with respect. Captain Morrison, today you have taught me something my people had forgotten. You have shown me what it means to fight not for survival, but for what is right. The core champion Krexar drifted away, a dark silhouette against the vast emptiness of space. The explosion from his shattered weapon echoed across the coms, a final punctuation mark to the battle. On the stable portion of the asteroid, Jake, Morrison adjusted his footing, his gravity belt humming faintly as it kept him anchored. He exhaled, the sound muffled by his suit's systems. That's game over, he muttered, holstering his sidearm. The core war leader's voice crackled. Over the com channel, cold and filled with disbelief. You defeated a core champion with trickery and physics? This is not the way of honorable combat. Jake snorted, looking up toward the distant stars where the fleets hung in silence, their weapons primed but unused.
Ow.
Honor doesn't leave much room for creativity. Mine does. A tense silence followed as both fleets processed what had just occurred. The core, who prided themselves on strength and tradition, had been outmaneuvered by a human using brains over brawn. For the core, this was unthinkable. For the humans, it was Tuesday. Back aboard the Lucky Strike, the atmosphere was electric. Cheers erupted as Jake stepped off the shuttle, his environmental suit scuffed but intact. The crew surrounded him, patting his shoulders and shouting congratulations. You did it, Captain, Sam exclaimed, her relief evident. Lisa grinned, holding up a repair drone like a trophy. Never doubted you for a second, boss. Jake chuckled, waving them off. All right, don't get too excited. We've still got work to do. approached his expression a mixture of awe and respect. "Captain Morrison, your methods were unconventional, but undeniably effective. The Corps will remember this day." Jake shrugged, his casual demeanor masking the exhaustion settling into his bones. "Good. Maybe they'll think twice before picking a fight next time." Meanwhile, aboard the Corps flagship, war leader Thakmor seethed. He stared at the visual feed of Krexar drifting powerlessly in space, his champion defeated not by brute force but by ingenuity. A junior officer hesitated before speaking. "War leader, our traditions dictate that we honor the outcome of the challenge." Thakmor's fists clenched, but he nodded. "Signal the fleet. We withdraw." As the Corps ships began to retreat, the human crew of the Lucky Strike erupted into cheers once more. Later, in the quiet of the captain's quarters, Jake sat alone, nursing a cup of something vaguely resembling coffee. The weight of the day pressed heavily on him. Zexai entered, uncharacteristically hesitant. "May I join you, Captain?" Jake gestured to a chair. "Sure, what's on your mind?" The Valeri commander sat down, his gaze thoughtful. "I have served in many conflicts, but I have never seen anyone fight as you did. You risked everything not for glory or conquest, but to protect strangers." Jake smiled faintly. "That's what we do. Call it stubbornness or stupidity. But humans don't leave people behind, even when it doesn't make sense." Zexai nodded slowly. "Your actions today have changed me, Captain. I see now that courage is not just about standing your ground, it's about standing for something greater." Jake raised his cup in a mock toast to standing for something, even when the ground under you is falling apart. Zexai raised an imaginary glass in return. To humanity. And in the cold void of space, the Lucky Strike sailed on, its crew bound not by strength or technology, but by a simple unyielding belief in doing the right thing. The galaxy would remember that day not for the destruction or death, but for the small, quiet choice of mercy in the face of war. Jake Morrison, salvage captain of the Lucky Strike, had shown a ruthless enemy the strength of humanity, not in combat, but in compassion. 3 months after that fateful duel on the asteroid, ripples of change spread through Corps space. Stories began to emerge of Corps commanders sparing prisoners, fleets withdrawing from unnecessary battles, and warriors asking questions that had never been asked before. Some Corps leaders denounced it as a weakness, a corruption of their warrior ethos. Others, particularly younger officers, saw it as evolution, a chance to be something more than conquerors. For Jake, though, life returned to its usual rhythm. The Lucky Strike buzzed with activity as the crew sorted through their latest haul of salvage. Lisa and Sam argued over inventory, Zexai drafted reports to send back to the Confederation, and Jake sat in the captain's chair, sipping his coffee and watching the stars drift by. Zexai entered the bridge, his expression thoughtful. "Captain Morrison, you've been quiet since we left Corps space." Jake chuckled. "Thinking, I guess. Never figured a salvage captain would end up on a Corps wanted poster, or inspire a cultural revolution, for that matter." Zexai smiled faintly. "The Corps called you weak for showing mercy. But I believe they are beginning to understand that your kind of weakness requires immense strength. I have seen it firsthand." Jake glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Think it'll stick, I do?" Zexai said. "Change in the galaxy often begins with a single, undeniable act of courage or compassion. The seeds have been planted. It may take years or centuries, but the Corps will remember what happened on that asteroid." Jake set his coffee down and stood, clapping a hand on Zex's shoulder. "Good. Maybe next time we run into them, they won't be pointing cannons at us." As the Lucky Strike slipped into hyperspace, bound for human space in its next adventure, Jake couldn't help but smile. They were just a ragtag crew trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. But for once, it felt like they had done something. That mattered, something that might change the stars themselves. Because that's what humanity did. They never stopped trying. They never gave up on doing the right thing. Most of all, they never left anyone behind.